Aria Bell wiped her hands on the faded apron as she stepped out of her tiny flower shop. The bell above the door jingled softly behind her, a gentle farewell after a day spent arranging blooms. The evening sun painted the sky in soft pinks and oranges, casting a warm glow over the quiet street. Today was special, her birthday, and she had saved every spare penny for months to afford a dinner at Le Chateau, the elegant French restaurant she had admired from afar for years. Her dress was simple, a soft cotton one she'd carefully washed and pressed the night before. It was nothing like the gowns she'd seen on the glossy magazines stacked at the grocery store, but it was hers. Her purse was worn, its leather cracked and supple from years of use, a far cry from the sleek clutches and handbags she imagined others carried into places like Le Chateau. The restaurant's entrance loomed ahead, a grand, polished doorway with crystal lanterns hanging above, gleaming under the streetlights. Inside, the gleam of silverware and the shimmer of polished wood welcomed an exclusive crowd. Aria took a deep breath, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nerves. She approached the hostess stand and attempted to order the dish she dreamed of tasting. "Filet Mignon, please," she said, her voice a bit soft and uncertain. The maitre d', a sharp-eyed man with a crisp suit, raised a brow and corrected her loudly. "It's filet mignon, madam. Are you familiar with the menu?" His tone was cold, cutting through the hushed murmurs from a few nearby diners. Eyes turned toward her, smirks and whispers filling the elegant room. Aria's cheeks burned. She felt suddenly small, out of place, an unwelcome guest in a shimmering world far from her own. Aria's fingers tightened around the strap of her faded purse as the maitre d's voice echoed in the polished dining room. The correction wasn't just a simple, helpful remark, it was sharp, loud enough for those seated nearby to hear clearly. A few patrons exchanged quick glances, some smirking with quiet amusement, their eyes gleaming with subtle condescension. Others lowered their gaze toward their wine glasses or gave polite but distant nods to avoid involvement, discomfort evident in their averted eyes. A woman in a silk blouse whispered something to her companion, who chuckled softly, sharing a glance that spoke volumes. A man in a tailored jacket smirked, tapping his fingers on the table with impatience as if the interruption was an unwelcome disturbance to his elegant evening. The atmosphere, once serene and refined, shifted perceptibly, leaving Aria isolated in a crowd that suddenly seemed icy and cold. She swallowed hard, feeling the sting of embarrassment spread across her cheeks. The carefully held excitement of the night twisted into a knot of shame and confusion. Her lips parted, searching for a graceful response, but the words scrambled and disappeared like whispers blown away by the wind. "Excuse me," she said quietly, avoiding the eyes that gleamed with judgment. "I'd like to cancel," she added, her voice barely above a whisper as she turned toward the exit. The maitre d's stern gaze followed her retreat, as if marking her as an intruder to be swiftly removed. Once outside, Aria's breath came in shallow gasps. The quiet hum of the city evening greeted her awkward departure, the bright warmth of the restaurant replaced by the cool night air brushing against her flushed skin. She found a bench nearby, sitting down slowly, her hands trembling as she clasped her purse tightly. The pain was fierce but confused, anger mingled with sadness, and an aching sense of loneliness gnawed at her chest. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the cool breeze soothe her damp face, allowing herself to be swallowed by the stillness. It was more than just humiliation, it was the crushing weight of being made to feel like she didn't belong. Her thoughts drifted, taking her back to the long months leading to this night. There had been early mornings and late nights at the flower shop, hands stained with dirt and sap as she arranged every bouquet with care. Many days she had skipped meals, too tired or too focused to eat, stretching paychecks to cover rent and supplies. The small moments of joy, sunlight on the petals, the smile of a happy customer, had been her sustenance. Her grandmother's voice echoed softly in her mind, a steady whisper of encouragement during difficult times. Life gives us blossoms in the strangest places, Arya. You've got to savor those moments, even if they're fleeting. It was those words that had fueled her dream to visit Le Chateau. This dinner was meant to celebrate not just a birthday, but a new beginning, a symbol of all the sacrifices made, all the resilience carried quietly for years. She had imagined the soft clink of fine china, the rich aromas of French cuisine, the gentle murmur of polite conversations. At least once, she wanted to feel part of that world, to taste something elegant and rare. But now, the reality was a bitter contrast. The laughter and whispers from the restaurant's patrons had cut deeper than any knife. She realized how deeply the walls of class and judgment stood between her dreams and her life. Despite careful preparation, despite saving so long, she was still seen as an outsider, someone who did not belong, someone to mock and dismiss. Arya's hands trembled as she reached into her purse and pulled out a small bouquet of wildflowers she had bought earlier, a gift she'd planned to keep for the evening, a touch of home amidst unfamiliar surroundings. She unfolded the delicate petals with slow care, seeking comfort in their simple beauty. The flowers were resilient, growing without lavish care or grand attention, thriving quietly. She saw a reflection of herself in them, strong but modest, plain but worthy. A soft tear escaped, tracing a solitary path down her cheek. She let it fall, not from weakness, but from the release of pain held too long inside. The deep hurt of the moment met the quiet hope that had carried her this far. Arya took a steadying breath and glanced up at the illuminated windows of Le Chateau. Inside, the laughter continued, the clink of glasses and murmured conversations a reminder of the night she had lost. But beyond the ache of rejection, something else stirred, a flicker of determination, a quiet refusal to be broken by cruelty. Slowly, she stood, fingers brushing the petals of the wildflowers one last time. The dream had been shattered, but she was still here. Still breathing. Still present. And the world outside awaited, wide and unpredictable. With a gentle shake of her head, Arya lifted her chin and began to walk away from the bench, the small bouquet held close to her heart. Her steps were slow at first, but steady, carrying her forward through the night, carrying the quiet strength of someone who, despite everything, had dared to dream. Arya walked away from the restaurant, the cool night air brushing against her face, carrying away some of the heaviness that clung to her. Her steps were slow and measured, the weight of the evening pressing down on her shoulders. She didn't know where she was heading, home, she thought, but even that felt like a distant goal. The streets glistened faintly from a recent rain, the scent of damp earth mingling with the cool breeze. Lost in her thoughts, she brushed past a narrow side street adjacent to Le Chateau. The dim glow of a street lamp illuminated a side entrance she hadn't noticed before. Curious and still lingering near the scene, she slowed down. The door was solid steel, painted a dull gray, obviously a fire exit. What caught her attention was the thick padlock securing it firmly shut. She frowned, pondering the mechanism. This was supposed to be a public establishment where safety was paramount. A locked fire exit was not only against safety regulations but also a serious hazard. As she stepped closer, the faint murmur of voices reached her ears through the barely cracked door. Peering carefully, Arya caught sight of two staff members standing just beyond the threshold, speaking in hushed tones. "Can't believe they're making us lock this," one whispered anxiously. "If something goes wrong, we could get blamed. No safety inspections will pass if the fire exit's locked." "Boss said it's to prevent staff from sneaking out early," the other replied, laughter edging his tone. "But it's stupid. What about the customer's safety?" Arya's stomach twisted. The arrogance in locking an emergency exit for convenience at the risk of danger. This wasn't just neglect, it was recklessness. She made a mental note of the locked door and edged away before she was noticed. Further down the alley, she spotted a brightly colored bin labeled organic waste only. Curious, she inched closer. The top was overflowing, but instead of the usual fruit peels and coffee grounds, Arya saw plastic wrappers, empty bottles of cleaning chemicals, and even food scraps mixed with suspicious-looking containers. Her brow furrowed. This was a serious sanitation violation. Mixing chemicals with organic waste could lead to contamination and health hazards. Something about this careless disposal unsettled her deeply. A few steps farther, Arya overheard a cheerful yet rushed conversation from behind a partially open kitchen door. "I'm telling you, we're running low on fresh meat. The boss says to reuse some cuts from yesterday's prep. That way, the orders will keep coming out and no one notices," said a young kitchen helper. "Are you serious?" the other voice replied. "That's dangerous. We could get into so much trouble if clients knew." Arya's heart pounded. She realized that her small humiliation and rejection at the restaurant were perhaps only a part of deeper problems beneath the gleaming surface, the luxury meant to hide unsafe practices and poor management. Her fingers knotted tightly around her purse as she pulled out her phone. Quietly, she began taking photos: the locked fire exit, the overflowing waste bin filled with hazards, and a quick snapshot of the kitchen door ajar enough to capture the exchange of nervous staff. When she finished, she carefully sent an email to the city's health department and fire safety officials. Her message was clear, concise. She described the locked fire exit that posed a danger to customers, the improper disposal of waste containing hazardous materials, and the concerning rumors of unsafe food handling she had overheard. Though her hands trembled from exhaustion and lingering embarrassment, Arya felt an unexpected calm settle over her. In that moment, she realized this act could be more than a quiet response to the night's events. It could be a chance to protect others, to bring light to a place that had dimmed her own dream with cruelty and disregard. As she slipped her phone back into her purse, she glanced once more toward the bright facade of Le Chateau. The glittering windows looked almost surreal against the darkened street, a stark contrast to the shadows she had glimpsed just beyond the entrance. Turning away, she began the walk home, her steps quieter now but more resolute. The city around her was alive with noises: the distant hum of cars, the occasional bark of a dog, the murmur of late-night conversations. Though her evening had not gone as she intended, something within her shifted. She understood that dignity was not measured by the places one visited, but by the choices one made in the face of hardship. Arya carried with her the delicate wildflowers she had brought, frayed around the edges but still radiant in their modest bloom, a symbol of quiet resilience in a world that often favored the flashiest and most polished. Tonight, she had been made to feel invisible and small, but she had also taken the first steps toward changing a part of the world that had been harmful in more ways than one. And as she walked beneath the streetlights that stretched down the winding sidewalks of the city, Arya Bell knew this was not the end of her story, but a new beginning. The emails Arya sent that night stirred a quiet ripple that soon became a wave. Within days, inspectors from the city's health and fire departments arrived at Le Chateau, their presence marked by official badges and clipped, serious expressions. They moved through the restaurant with sharp eyes, checking every corner, every room. Photographs of the padlocked fire exit and the waste bins aroused their concern, and whispers of the overheard kitchen practices lent urgency to their investigation. News outlets quickly caught wind of the inspector's visit. A local reporter followed the story closely, publishing an article highlighting the violations at the high-end restaurant that many had viewed as untouchable. The headline captured attention: "Luxury restaurant's hidden safety flaws exposed by watchful customer." Social media buzzed with shares, comments, and threads spilling over with similar experiences. Arya's name, initially unknown to many, started to appear alongside the story, described as the modest florist who had dared to speak out against a world that often dismissed voices like hers. The narrative framed her not as a victim of a humiliating night but as a courageous individual who had transformed personal pain into action with real consequences. The response online was swift and intense. Support poured in from people across the city and beyond, many sharing their own stories of mistreatment in places where they were subtly or overtly looked down upon. Comments applauded Aria's bravery, calling her a voice for the overlooked and a symbol of quiet dignity. Among the voices of encouragement were small business owners and service workers who felt their experiences had been ignored for too long. Some posted photos of their own modest workplaces, expressing solidarity and pride in their honest labor. The momentum grew beyond a single story, becoming a conversation about respect, fairness, and safety in all spaces, regardless of social standing. Le Chateau's management, realizing the growing scrutiny, issued a public statement. The tone was apologetic but guarded, pledging to review their policies and cooperate with authorities. They announced a suspension of the maitre d', whose haughty correction of Aria had gone viral and now became a symbol of the restaurant's underlying problems. The suspension sent a clear message that the company recognized the harm caused by that public humiliation. In the days that followed, the city officials released the inspector's findings. Several serious violations were confirmed, including the hazardous locked fire exit, improper waste disposal practices, and evidence suggesting that some food was reused against health regulations. Fines were imposed, along with a temporary closure of the restaurant until these issues were corrected and proper staff training completed. The restaurant's fine dining veneer remained, but underneath, cracks had been exposed. Customers who had once visited for prestige reconsidered their patronage, and some canceled reservations, citing concerns raised by the reports. Amid all this, Aria found herself receiving dozens of messages, from strangers offering thanks, to neighbors expressing pride, to other, simple, customers who bravely shared their own humiliations in spaces meant to be refined and welcoming. They wrote about being ignored, mocked, or treated as invisible in restaurants, shops, and even public services. One message stood out. It was from Melina, a fellow small business owner who ran a local bakery. She thanked Aria for inspiring a monthly community event focused on kindness and inclusion, where neighborhood businesses shared stories and meals together without pretense or judgment. This ripple effect warmed Aria's heart. Though at times the attention felt overwhelming, Aria held fast to a quiet hope. While the experience had been painful, it had sparked change far greater than she imagined possible. The restaurant's disgrace had opened doors for conversations about dignity and fairness in places once thought untouchable. The day-to-day of her flower shop brought familiar comfort, but the knowledge that something bigger was happening gave her a gentler strength. The customers who came in smiled with unspoken understanding, and the neighborhood felt a little more connected. One afternoon, as Aria tended to a cluster of chrysanthemums, she paused to reflect on how her small act had encouraged others to step forward, to hold spaces accountable and to demand respect. She understood that dignity was not granted by wealth or status but earned through courage, compassion, and the willingness to refuse silence. Le Chateau was quieter now, its glitter dimmed by consequence. The maitre d', who had once flung cutting words at her, was now absent, his arrogance replaced by a lesson in humility. Staff meetings at the restaurant reportedly included new training on customer service and empathy. Aria had sparked something larger than herself. The story of her mispronounced order and the cruel mockery that followed became a catalyst for change, igniting a movement toward kindness and accountability in her city's social fabric. In the quiet moments between arranging lilies and watering roses, Aria often smiled softly. The world had shifted in some small but meaningful ways, and despite the hardships she faced, she felt a deeper connection to the community around her. Her courage had not only reclaimed her dignity but had begun to transform the way others saw and treated each other. And as the city moved forward, so did she, steady, proud, and quietly unstoppable. Weeks slipped by in a rhythm both familiar and new. Aria Bell resumed her days in the flower shop, tending carefully to each bloom, the scents of jasmine and lavender wrapping around her like an old friend. The shop was modest but full of life, petals soft beneath her fingertips and customers greeting her with warm smiles that seemed to carry a shared sense of pride and respect. Although she wore the same simple cotton dresses and carried her worn purse, something had changed within her, an invisible thread of confidence woven through every step she took. One crisp morning, as sunlight filtered through the shop's small window, a neatly sealed envelope arrived. Aria opened it with her usual gentle hands and found a letter printed on official city stationery. The mayor of the city had written to thank her personally for her bravery and integrity. The letter praised her courage in bringing dangerous practices to light and highlighted how her actions had helped protect fellow citizens. The mayor invited Aria to speak at an upcoming community event focused on dignity and fair treatment for all, an opportunity that both startled and humbled her. She took the letter to a nearby bench, the same one where bittersweet memories of that humiliating evening still echoed faintly in her mind. Breathing deeply, she folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her purse. Her thoughts danced between nervous excitement and quiet determination. A chance to share her story and inspire others was more than she had ever dreamed. Not long after, an unexpected message arrived from the new management team at Le Chateau. The note was sincere, acknowledging past mistakes and expressing regret for the unkind treatment she'd received. They thanked her for the lesson in humility and invited her to visit the restaurant once improvements were in place. Aria read the words carefully, then folded the letter with a thoughtful smile. She chose to respond with grace, expressing appreciation for the apology but making it clear that her strength came from moving forward, not dwelling on the past. One afternoon, dressed in her usual humble attire but carrying herself with unmistakable poise, Aria took a quiet walk down the city streets. As she passed Le Chateau, she noticed a freshly painted sign near the entrance announcing new policies, improved safety protocols, staff training on respect and hospitality, and a promise of transparency to customers. The restaurant looked calmer, the glint in its windows less like a show of status and more like a commitment to change. Aria stopped for a moment, watching a waiter open the door for a small group of smiling patrons who entered with a sense of ease and welcome. The grand chandeliers inside glimmered softly, not with arrogance but warmth. It was clear this place was learning something new, about respect, fairness, and the dignity of every person who crossed its threshold. When she returned home, Aria settled at her small kitchen table with a steaming cup of tea. She arranged a bouquet of freshly cut flowers at the center, a mix of daisies, tulips, and the wildflowers she loved most. The familiar patterns of petals and stems were comforting, a reminder of the quiet strength found in nature's simplicity. Evenings like this, filled with laughter shared between close friends who stopped by her shop, felt like victories. They celebrated stories both ordinary and extraordinary, finding joy in the small things, a child's smile, the scent of rain, the way light fell on leaves. The woman who had once stumbled over a fancy menu item, mispronouncing Filet Mignon, was still there, the same Aria who worked with dirt-stained hands and carried a worn purse. But now, she walked taller, her presence calm and assured. She knew that dignity was not a gift from the world but a quiet power cultivated through courage, resilience, and kindness. She hadn't needed wealth or prestige to claim her place. In the months that followed, Aria's story inspired others to speak up and stand firm in their own lives. The community came together around shared hopes for respect and fairness, building a gentle but unshakable foundation that embraced everyone, no matter where they came from or what they wore. And as the sun cast warm golden rays through the shop's windows, Aria smiled, a simple florist who had faced humiliation and emerged with a heart strong enough to change the world around her. That was enough.